So, if you're joining us today, chances are you're looking for trusted strategic guidance on how to optimize your family's financial planning as you prepare for or enjoy retirement, and you are in the right place. Our host today is someone who's spent more than 35 years helping families protect and grow their wealth with smart, savvy tax planning. James Lange is a CPA, an attorney, and a nationally recognized expert on Roth IRA conversions, retirement plan distributions, and holistic tax and estate planning strategies. A prolific writer, Jim's retirement planning techniques have been featured in the Wall Street Journal 37 times, including the last time in late December. If you haven't checked out that article yet, especially if you have a child or loved one with a disability, I really recommend that you check that out. And he's authored 10 best-selling books on financial planning, including Retire Secure, The Roth Revolution, Beating the New Death Tax, The $214,000 Mistake, How to Double Your Social Security and Maximize Your IRAs, and Retire Secure for professors and TIAA participants. Those books have become classics and are endorsed by some of the country's top experts, including Charles Schwab, the late Larry King, Jane Bryant Quinn, Roger Ibbotson, Ed Slott, Bob Keebler, Larry Kotlikoff, and of course, the great Burton Malkiel. But what sets Jim apart is really his ability to take complex tax law and turn it into clear, actionable strategies. He's been ahead of the curve for decades, from publishing the first peer-reviewed article on Roth IRAs in 1998 to predicting the end of the stretch IRA years before Congress passed the Secure Act. Through his interrelated financial firms, a CPA firm that prepares more than 750 tax returns annually, and a registered investment advisory firm that helps manage and plan for nearly $1 billion in assets under management, Jim and our team have helped hundreds of families build financial plans that are personalized to their needs. And as a member of our team here at Lange, I've had the opportunity to get a unique behind the scenes view of just how much Jim cares about presenting great information that's topically relevant in these workshops. And this morning's content heavy session is packed full of tax savvy retirement planning strategies that you'll be able to apply and benefit from whether you decide to work with us or not. So please join me in welcoming Jim Lange.
It was February 16th, 1998, and I got the call. Your business is literally on fire. I go out to the business, see the flames, much higher than the building. And I had tax season coming up. So I needed a place to do my business and to do the tax season quickly. I went down the street where there was another place available, same owner. I made a deal on the spot with the agent, and we started moving basically a bunch of charred computers, which, by the way, were very well backed up, so we didn't lose any data, to our new office. But we incurred a lot of expenses, and I didn't get the insurance reimbursement till the next year. So what happened was for 1998, my income went way down. And then when I was reimbursed in 1999, my income went way back up again. So my income basically was here. Then it went down to here in 98. And then in 99, it went back up. So what is the logical thing to do? Make a Roth IRA conversion of everything that my wife and I had in our IRAs and 401ks. Now, my wife she's a software engineer with a master's degree in electrical engineering from Carnegie Mellon, and she wanted to see the math on this. And at the time, they didn't have any of the software that they have now. So we actually worked it out on an Excel spreadsheet. And I showed her that over time that we would ultimately be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars better off if we made that conversion. And we did. And interestingly, that story, as well as other Roth IRA information, was later published in Forbes magazine. It was actually on the cover. And that was a big impetus to what I knew was going to be very important for my clients for years, if not generations, which is that Roth IRA conversions can literally change your life. To be, 10,000, 100,000, sometimes more than $1 million better off, particularly if you measure over your child's lifetime, is just such a huge difference. And I did write the first peer review article, so it was, gone over by these nitpicking CPAs, and uh, it really just kind of propelled me to want to educate people on Roth IRA conversions and the benefits that it could mean for your family. And that is one of the things that we are going to do today. So, from those kind of, let's say, humble beginnings of having the fire, and by the way, at the time, and many of you have been with me actually more than that, more than 26 years, but or I guess 28 years now. But it was, if you recall, for some of you, I was on the second floor above a pizza shop at that time. And one of the lessons from that I learned from this whole thing is never ever put your office above a pizza shop because there was an electrical fire. Anyway, we're going to talk about some of the big problems that a lot of the people that tend to attend these work webinars encounter, which is a crippling taxation of your IRA, 401k, 403b, SEP, KEO, etc., both while you are alive in the minimum required distribution stage, and then also in the legacy stage, because particularly with the Secure Act and the income tax acceleration on your IRAs and retirement plans at your death, your wealth will just be whittled significantly unless you are taking proactive steps. And probably for most of you, one of the most important proactive steps is a series of strategically planned Roth IRA or Roth 401k or Roth 403b conversions. It is, for many people, it is one of the most important things that you can do where you actually have control, because you don't really have control of your portfolio. You can do the asset allocation and you can pick stocks and bonds, etc. But the truth is, you don't really have control over that. And there's a lot of things that you can't control. But one of the things you can control is your Roth IRA conversion strategy, or sometimes, appropriately, a strategy of not making a Roth IRA conversion, which is, for some people, the best course. So I'm not here to try to sell Roth IRA conversions. And I know I sometimes have a reputation of, oh yeah, you go see Jim and his firm, they're going to try to talk you into doing Roth IRA conversions. No, no, no. What we're going to do is we're going to do the math. And we're going to let the math dictate what we recommend to you. And more times than not, and not necessarily this year, next year, but sometime during your lifetime, a Roth IRA conversion, or more likely a series of Roth IRA conversions, is going to be the best course for you. So we're going to talk about some of the peer-reviewed concepts, and it's always nice to me. I am a believer in math. I am a believer in science, and I am a believer in peer review. So just like doctors get articles peer-reviewed in the New England Journal of Medicine, CPAs get peer-reviewed by going to the tax advisor. And many of the same concepts that I wrote about in 1998 still apply, and we're going to go over some of those concepts that I think can make a huge difference in people's lives. We're also going to talk about something that I call the secret. It is one of these concepts, and it is amazing to me how many people, other than the people who have been following me for a while, and I know for many of you that you have attended multiple webinars over the years, so this will not come as a shock. But the secret is critically important to really understand not only Roth IRAs and Roth IRA conversions, but just the difference between having IRAs and 401ks and 403bs, et cetera, as a major part of your portfolio compared to what I would call after-tax dollars, which is not IRAs, 401ks, 403bs. We are going to talk about some advanced Roth conversion techniques, some of which can make a huge difference. Depending on time, I might cut out one or two because I always like to take some questions. But there's some very interesting advanced techniques that won't apply to everybody, but if they do apply to you, it can save, again, excuse me, tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars down the road for you and your heirs. So let's talk about what is new uh, for this year. So the big thing that was going on for Roth IRA conversions and for planning in general was the federal income tax by the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act um, that basically slashed income taxes, and it was supposed to be a temporary tax cut. And the tax rates were supposed to come back January 1 of this year. So for a number of years, we were saying, okay, I like to do the Roth IRA conversions when the income tax are lower. So I was saying, okay, let's see if we can get most of our Roth IRA conversions done before 2016, because in 2016, the income tax rates are going to go back up. And, of course, I was always suspicious. Well, what's going to happen? You can never really predict what's going on politically, what's going to happen in with the tax rates. And I still believe in the long run that tax rates, and we are basically at a historical low in the United States, will go back up. But what we have in terms of the short term is an extension, if you will, of these very low tax rates, because the OBBBA, which is the One Big Beautiful Tax Act, makes the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 that were temporary permanent. So what that can mean, this is a huge benefit for, frankly, older and wealthier IRA owners, and their families will benefit because of these new permanent continued tax rates. And we want to take advantage of every tax break that we can, because we're locking in these low tax rates. And guess what? That creates an opportunity for more Roth IRA conversions. So I didn't think I was going to be talking about Roth IRA conversions as much this year, because I thought the rates were going to go much higher, but they're not. So we still have a lot of opportunity. Unfortunately, one of the issues with the new Tax Act is that it's fantastically complicated. It's not just lowering the rates across the board for everything. And our CPAs, and we have serious number crunching CPAs, they spend enormous amounts of time getting into the nitty gritty that, frankly, I don't like to do, and frankly can't do, and I'm not up on it like they are. But they hate it because if you're going to do the job right, which they do, there's so many additional complications. We now have a bifurcated code, which means that some of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 are permanent, but others have rolling sunsets. And this makes life miserable if you're trying to come up with the ideal, not for this year or next year, but the ideal long-term Roth IRA conversion plan, which is what we are aiming for. There's aggressive phase outs. People used to think with the tax rates, if you went $1 higher, that your tax rate was going to go way up and that your tax was going to go way up. And I kept saying, no, no, no. If you're $1 over a tax rate, it's just that $1 that's going to be taxed at the higher rate. Well, now with some of the aggressive phase outs, going up $1 can trigger a disproportionate loss of deductions. So even even $1,000 can make a huge difference So we have to be a lot more careful now. And it's miserable, especially because we have to get the conversions done before year end, and we sometimes don't have exact numbers in terms of capital gains and other things that we sometimes don't get until after year end. So the CPAs hate it. And then the alternative minimum tax, which has always been a mess, it's even worse than before. So I guess this isn't your problem, although if you're a do-it-yourselfer, it is your problem. But I'll just tell you that life is not simpler. People sometimes say, don't you fear that, the simplification of the Tax Act will reduce the complications and it'll be easier for people? And that's one thing I never fear. Very frankly, we wish for a more steady tax law that made it easier to predict what was going to happen so that we can plan more effectively. But unfortunately, those are not the cards that we are dealt. In fact, I would say after the new tax law, by the time somebody does your tax return, the ship has sailed for planning. It's kind of like the tax return is the autopsy. What we want is preventive medicine that keeps your wealth healthy. And really, it's the planning that is much more important than the actual tax preparation itself, because by after year end, it's well, there's a few things you can do, but most of the things that need to be done, including Roth IRA conversions, have to happen before year end. And again, Roth conversion planning is more complicated than ever. So I want to talk for a minute about what I would call the essence of the Roth IRA conversion. And this is what I sometimes call the secret. So what you're doing is you're taking an asset, typically an IRA, a 401k, a 403b, a SEP, a KEO. What all of these assets have in common is that neither you, is that you have not yet paid income tax on this money. The money might have come from your contribution, it might have come from an employer contribution, but the thing that is critical is that you have not yet paid income tax on that money. And we call that a traditional IRA, 401k, 403b, etc. Then, if the idea is to convert that to a Roth, you're now going to have to pay taxes on that money, which is a violation of the old CPA rule, which was to pay taxes later, which, by the way, that is our website, paytaxeslater.com, because for years, that's what let's say, a lot of the savvy planning revolved around. Now if I was going to rename the website, it might be something called Pay Taxes Later, except for the Roth. And then there's an exception to that. But anyway, you pay tax on the IRA, 401k, 403b, more likely a portion of it. And in return, you get a Roth IRA or a Roth 403b. That money grows income tax free for the rest of your life. If you leave it to your spouse, the rest of your spouse's life, and there's no required minimum distribution for you or your spouse. And you get an additional 10 years, sometimes for certain beneficiaries, a lifetime stretch of that Roth IRA, even after you and your spouse are gone. All right, but here's what we call the secret. And the secret is measuring wealth in purchasing power. So let's say, for discussion's sake, that you have $900,000 in after-tax dollars. That's all you have. You have $900,000 in your portfolio, no IRA, no 401k, etc. And I have $1 million in my IRA. Well, measured in whoever has the most money wins, I have more money than you, right? Well, that's true, except you have more purchasing power than I do. So If I want to go out and buy something, I have to pay income taxes on my $1 million IRA or whatever portion I take out. So let's say that, and not that I'm advocating this, but let's say I have to cash in my entire IRA, and I won't get into the complications of the math, but let's just keep it simple and say 24%. Then I would have only $760,000 to spend, where you would have $900,000 to spend. So to me, if I want to measure wealth, I don't want to measure wealth in total dollars. I want to measure wealth in purchasing power, right? That's really mission critical. And, and by the way, I have taught this literally to thousands of people. Because if you don't measure wealth in purchasing power, you're going to get convoluted um, advice, or you're not going to calculate the ideal Roth IRA conversion amount. And the other thing is, you're not going to know how much money you can safely spend. So here's the deal with Roth IRAs and Roth IRA conversions. All right, let's call me Mr. Status Quo, and let's call you Mr. Roth. And let's keep it real simple. We both have $100,000 in our traditional IRA. We both have 24,000 outside the IRA. So we both have $124,000 in total dollars. Okay. I sit there and I do nothing. Where you say, okay, I want to make a Roth IRA conversion of my $100,000 IRA. So you fill out the appropriate paperwork, and then you get a 1099 from the government that says, okay, please pay income tax on that $100,000 that you just cashed in for a Roth IRA. And the tax on that ends up being $24,000. You have the $24,000 to pay the income tax, because remember, we both started with $24,000 of after-tax dollars. So you use that money to pay the tax. You're left with $100,000 in a Roth. I still have 124,000, 100,000 in my IRA, and $24,000 outside my IRA. So let's take a look of measuring this in purchasing power. Since I have to pay income tax on my IRA when I cash it in, I only have 100,000 in purchasing power. How much money do you have to pay in taxes when you cash in your IRA? I'm sorry, your Roth IRA? Zero. So what that means is on day one, not year 1, year 10, year 30, 50, etc. On day one, you break even with a Roth IRA conversion. See, that's what so many people in the media and so many of these calculators out there, they measure in total dollars. And you get all kinds of convoluted pieces of advice and convoluted Roth IRA conversion recommendations if you're using total dollars as your measurement tool. If you use purchasing power as your measurement tool, you're going to get a true measure, and you're going to be able to do a much better job. But see, a lot of times the popular press and a lot of these calculators, if they're measuring in total dollars, what they're going to end up saying is that Roth IRA conversions aren't good for seniors. And the reason for that is it will take so many years for the tax-free growth in the Roth to overcome the $24,000 that you had to pay in income taxes. But that's the wrong way to think about it. And what happens if you do that is that you will end up being much, much, way too conservative on your Roth IRA conversions. Because if they're not measuring using the most accurate measurement of what I would consider wealth, which is purchasing power, not total dollars. If you measure in purchasing power, Roth IRA conversions might be great for seniors. Um, and so much software out there and the AI solutions that you would think the programmers would know more about it. But I think unfortunately you have a lot of times people who are maybe good at programming, but not so good at understanding the important concepts. I think a lot of these programs do more harm than good because they're using the wrong measurement tool, which I and my team think is really basic. And by the way, speaking of AI, even some of the programs that get that right, I would love a really good AI tool that could cut down significantly the work that we do. And I wish there was one that we could rely on and use. And we're always looking, but we haven't found anything that we're really happy with. Now, um, some of them might come up with the ideal plan for 1 year, but that's not the right idea. In fact, even just planning for your lifetime is typically not the right idea. So a lot of the programs, if you want to, plan for your lifetime and your kids, you have to, it's like two different separate calculations. So if you're just doing it based on your lifetime, you're going to get typically well, I won't say wrong, but the suboptimal conversion amount. So a lot of the software out there, including some of the stuff that I really like. Larry Kotlikoff has a program called Maxify, and it gets a lot of good reviews. And it was either in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. And I've known Larry for 20 years. I really like him. And I wanted that software to work for us. And Tom and Jen tried it out and they said, well, it doesn't have work papers. To me, we're CPAs. We want work papers. We want to know every assumption that was used. We want to be able to track all the math from beginning to end. And hardly any of this software does that. And the other thing is we want to do it for just not only 1 year or 2 years, but for your life. And frankly, we typically want to do it for your life and the life of, let's say, your kids. Now, that doesn't mean that we are Luddites and we're not using software. Of course, we do. But some of the AI software, it just doesn't have what we want. We want the assumptions. We want to see the calculations. We do like Brent Marks' Roth IRA analyzer. And by the way, it's more like a spreadsheet that we can control the variables. And Steve Coleman is very well known to their support people because he's complaining, hey, why didn't you have this feature? Why don't you have that feature? And they know he's right because he would like things more automated. But for the things that they don't have, guess what he does? He creates his own Excel spreadsheet. And we are still using some of those Excel spreadsheets that Steve has prepared. It's a much more manual process than you would expect. And it's much more, it takes a lot more time to do that. And guess what else we use? We actually use 1040 preparation software. So we want to test our results. Okay, so we think that we're going to be in, say, the 24% bracket, and we want to test that. And we actually put it in, we have, let's call it TurboTax on steroids. And we put it in that. And guess what? Sometimes we don't come out with the exact number that we thought, but it works as a great, let's say, check to make sure that we are on the right track. And we do use, in the old days, we used to call it a Form 99, where we tried to predict what the tax return software was going to come out with. It's getting more and more complicated as there's so many more interrelated tax attributes for the returns. But we still use some of the applications that Steve Coleman developed for us. And by the way, Steve just celebrated his 30th anniversary working with us. So he joins a number of people who have been with us for 30 years or more. And what I would say is the skill and the judgment of the person running the numbers is more important than which tools they're using. And having a deep understanding of the tools that they are using and having used those tools for years, I think is much better than putting in something and you don't know how the software got what it got. So before I go on, are there any questions about, let's say, purchasing power and measured in purchasing power? Because if you don't accept that, um, then it's going to be hard. So I do, and I know I'm speaking quickly, and I tend to do that because there's a lot of information that I want to impart. I genuinely believe if you are spending time with us, that we want to not just do a sales pitch. By the way, there will be a sales pitch at the end, but I want to genuinely provide a lot of great information. So, Erica, do we have any questions in that, or maybe something else, if not in purchasing power?
We do have one question. I think James is just looking kind of for a summary of what purchasing power is and how it's defined related to Roth conversions, which is kind of what you've already gone over, but maybe just a summation of why you even tell people about purchasing power. Like, I think the core point there is so that people understand that how to analyze the benefits of a Roth conversion from day one in reality versus, or in purchasing power versus.
Well, since I'm an attorney, I can take any question and answer any other question I want. But what I'll do is I'll maybe rephrase the question and say, forgetting Roth IRA conversions, what's the most important thing about understanding measuring money in purchasing power? Well, for one thing, it's to know how much money you can afford to spend. The second session is going to be all about the safe withdrawal rate. Well, and let's even forget all the new stuff and let's just say that it's $1 million. Let's just say it's 4%. And let's say that you have $1 million in your IRA. And you go, oh, okay. Well, and let's say you have a 30-year life expectancy. All right, 4% times a million is $40,000. I can go out and spend $40,000. No, you can't. If it's in an IRA, that means that you can spend $40,000 minus the taxes on $40,000. If the $1 million is outside the IRA, then you can spend 4% then you can spend the 40,000. By the way, that number, as we're going to see in the second session, has been raised to 4.7% using still very conservative calculations and estimates. So the first thing is, how much money do you really have that you can afford to spend? The other thing that, of course, that I'm going to emphasize is that it's going to give you a much better way to figure out the optimal Roth IRA conversion amount. Because if if you're still using total dollars, and let's say that you're in your 60s or older, the math is going to look like a Roth IRA conversion is not a good idea under most reasonable assumptions. But, and the reason for that is because it's going to take so many years for the tax-free feature of the Roth to overcome the money that you had to pay up front to get into the Roth. On the other hand, if you're measuring in purchasing power, Roth IRA conversions might be a great thing for seniors that can sometimes help them and their families be better off by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why don't we take one more and then we'll move on? I'm not hearing you, Erica. I think you're muted.
Sorry. This next one is a combination of at least three questions. A lot of people are asking about factors that you consider or that we consider when we're looking at Roth conversions. This question comes from Anonymous. It says, how can you know what the maximum amount from a regular IRAs as you convert to Roth without increasing Medicare costs? Another, Paula asked, how does your software handle the interplay between optimizing a series of Roth conversions while optimizing minimizing Medicare and IRMA tiers?
Well, we're going to cover that, but I'll just do the short version right now, because a lot of, let's say, math conscious people are saying, hey, gee, if I do and let's just say that you're just thinking simple tax rates. If I go to say the top of the 24% bracket, and that's the ideal Roth conversion amount, gee, that throws my income up, and that will increase my Medicare Part B um, tax 2 years from now. So really, I ended up being in a higher tax bracket. So don't I have to take that into consideration when I'm preparing and planning for how much money I can convert? And the answer is yes, you do. On the other hand, what a lot of people do is say, oh, okay, I will convert and I'm only going to worry about the Medicare Part B tax, let's say, brackets. And what happens if you do that is that you sometimes underestimate how much money you can convert, because what a lot of people don't take into consideration is that if you do a Roth conversion, your minimum required distribution for the rest of your life is going to go lower. And that could put you in a lower tax bracket. So sometimes they don't think about, oh, gee, the long-term effect. Yes, my IRMA tax might go up for a couple years, but the long term is that the IRMA tax will actually go down. So and there's no simple rule of thumb. I wish there was, because it has to be calculated more manually than you would think. But is IRMA an important consideration? We actually have in our book, the actually both books have an entire chapter on IRMA considerations that Steve Coman wrote, and he gets into the nitty gritty. But I will just say it's not yes, you have to take that into consideration, but um, it's not, oh my goodness, I can't go into a higher IRMA bracket. But what this demonstrates is that these is finding out the ideal Roth conversion. It is math. It really is. And people love to say, oh, my situation's different, or they have rules of thumb. But when it comes down to it, it really is math. And yes, your goals are part of math. And your goals, let's say two people have identical portfolios and one doesn't have kids and is planning to leave everything to charity, and one does have kids and wants to provide for their kids, even though they have an identical portfolio and identical tax rates, et cetera, the assumptions are different, because the assumptions for the person leaving it to their kids is they're more likely to want to use the measuring lives, not just of themselves, but also of their kids. And we will typically end up with a much more aggressive, that is higher Roth conversion than somebody who is maybe leaving everything to charity, in which case we might not recommend any Roth conversion because we want the highest amount of money going to the charity. And maybe for them, it doesn't make any difference. So yes, the assumptions can vary, but it's still basically math. And we could talk about, well, which assumptions are right, which assumptions aren't right. But if you don't measure in purchasing power and you don't understand where the numbers are coming from, you're likely to come up with a far than optimal amount. And people make a lot of mistakes in this area. One of the mistakes is doing nothing, not even considering it. Two is using the wrong software, or perhaps to be generous, let's call it user error on the person using the software, because a lot of this software that we've looked at is even complicated for us. Um, and again, we have not been happy with the software that is available for consumers. Sometimes people just guess, or they have kind of a rule of thumb, like go to the top of the existing tax bracket. But like we had just demonstrated before, going to the top of the existing income tax bracket might trigger additional IRMA tax or Medicare Part B that you have to consider. The other thing is following the advice of, quote, so-called experts who, in my opinion, are not experts. And to me, if there's somebody who's making Roth IRA conversions, they have to really know their stuff. If there's a financial advisor and he's, let's say, very good at investments or asset allocation or asset location or tax loss harvesting or other things, that's fine. But if they don't have a Roth background and they don't really get it, I think that they would be more honest if they say, well, we just don't have that expertise, rather than trying to do the job and not do it well. And you end up with a suboptimal, maybe even worse than doing nothing recommendation. And then the other thing is, oh, my situation is different. I even get this from engineers who should believe in math and science. Oh, well, my situation is different because, and then they give me the reasons why. Well, my wife is going to live to be 100. Well, we're both going to die when we're 70 or whatever it is. And to me, that information is very relevant, but that can be put into the assumptions to come up with the ideal amount. So it's still math, and to me, we can't get around it. The biggest issue we have is not knowing the future in terms of the portfolio and tax rates. So we can talk about that, but if we take away those elements, it becomes a more certain matter of math. And that's what we believe in, math and science. And we still think that Roth IRA conversions for many, many IRA and retirement plan owners is the lowest hanging fruit for you to increase your and your family's financial security. Okay, so why don't we do some numbers? And I tried to keep it simple because in reality, we end up converting different amounts for different years, et cetera, et cetera. But let's just do, let's just say a couple, what we call running the numbers. So let's say that, I said before that the ideal years to convert, let's say your income is here and then it goes down to here and then it goes back up to here. You want to do it while your income is low. So typically between retirement and either Social Security at 70, not 67 or 62, but that's another issue for another day, particularly if you have the strongest earnings record between you and your spouse. Typically, I want the person with the strongest earning record to wait until 70 for a bunch of reasons. And then let's say minimum required distribution at 73, depending on what year you were born. Excuse me. So we compared doing a series of conversions versus not doing a series of conversions. Difference is life-changing. And by the way, we like to measure in inflation-adjusted dollars. I can't tell you in the past, I haven't been tempted to say, oh boy, you're just hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're millions of dollars better off. But in a way, that's not really fair because that doesn't give people an idea of what they understand. Like we understand 2026 dollars. And if we have inflation of, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5% over many years, the dollar is going to be worth obviously a lot less. So we like to measure in today's dollars, or let's call it inflation adjusted dollars. And what you'll see, for this is just for the IRA owner and their spouse. but by doing a series of conversions for just 5 years, that they can be better off in their lifetime by over $260,000 using relatively conservative, legitimate assumptions, which I'm not going to bore you with. And that is very significant. But what is even more significant is if they are, like most of our clients, not going to die broke, and they're, like most of our clients, not spending Roth IRAs before their after-tax dollars and their traditional dollars, and they end up dying with Roth IRA conversions. Let's look at the kids of the people who made Roth IRA conversions, and this chart represented in the solid black line versus the kids of the people who made it who didn't do the Roth conversions, represented in the serrated line. And you'll see over the life of the kids, we end up with, like a $2 million difference measured in today's dollars. So that's the difference between your kid being broke and your kid having $2 million. Yes, it's, over many years, we're talking about your life expectancy and your kid's life expectancy. And the Roth IRA conversion isn't instant wealth. It's kind of like grow wealthy slowly, but that is life changing for your kid to have $2 million in today's dollars versus running out of money. So this is very, very significant. One way to look at it is, if you were a farmer, would you rather pay income taxes on the seed and or forgo the deduction on when you purchase the seed and then have the money grow income tax free? Or would you rather get a deduction for the seed and then have the money grow, but you not only have to pay back the money that you got for the cost of the seed, but also the growth? And the way it works is typically you're better off foregoing or paying tax on the seed or foregoing the income tax deduction on the seed and getting the money grown tax free. Before I get more into some of the details, maybe I will ask Erica if there are any other questions that we have up to now.
Yes, Jim. Actually, I've tried to categorize them. And thank you so much, guys. And any more questions that you have, keep rolling them in. As I mentioned earlier, Jim some often actually addresses leftover questions from webinars in short videos on our YouTube channel. Actually, Justin, if you'd like, you could put the links to our socials there. If you're not already following us on social, it's definitely a good idea to start. We actually put a lot of content, especially on YouTube Shorts. So, I have some questions, Jim, a couple clarifying questions about your purchasing power example, and then I also have some tax bracket considerations for Roth conversion questions. I've grouped them together. Which would you prefer to start with?
Well, let's start with do it in chronological order. Let's do the purchasing power first.
Okay, great. So this first one is asking, it's a clarification question, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but of course I'll let you answer it, about the example that you used to demonstrate the purchasing power on day one. And Anonymous asks, what about the lost earning power over time on the 24,000 paid in taxes to do the Roth conversion? I know that in the assumptions, yeah, you forgot. Oh my
Oh
God.
goodness, I forgot about that. And you know who else missed that? All the peer reviewers at the American Institute of CPAs. All those nitpicking CPAs completely forgot that if I don't make the conversion, that I'm going to not only have the $24,000, but that $24,000 is going to be invested. And what about the earnings and the dividends and the capital gain growth on that 24,000? No, I assure you that that has been taken into consideration. That's an easy one. Maybe you could catch me on, and frankly, I do get some questions that catch me, but that to us is pretty basic. We're some pretty serious number crunchers, and we've written all kinds of peer review articles on Roth IRA conversions, and I've been teaching courses in it, And Steve Coleman is like a Roth genius, almost like a Roth God, and he has taught his disciples, uh, Dom, Jen, and Mike, very, very well. And we're never going to miss something so basic as that. So why don't we take one more?
So basically, the benefits of that purchasing power difference on day one actually have taken into account
Yes.
that basic
If,
factor.
if I went into the like the nitty-gritty math, I think I would bore most people to tears. There would be some engineers that would like it, but I'm not going to.
Although, if you are one of those people that are hankering for more details about assumptions, I can tell you that a lot of similar examples to the one in this slideshow are available in this book. And in here, every single assumption is delineated. There's an entire section just for assumptions. So, the next question, Jim, is I'm going to move into the tax bracket considerations for Roth conversion set of questions. So this first one comes from Dan, and he says, can you go into the details about how to specifically incorporate factors other than just tax rates into your Roth conversion math? For instance, now and then he goes on to use an example of IRMA implications, but his question is asking, what other items should we be considering when we're talking about tax bracket considerations for Roth conversions?
Well, of course, Irma is one, but it gets pretty messy because even just think dividends. Well, you could have qualified, non-qualified dividends. One is capital gain, one is ordinary income. Then I talked about the bifurcated system that we now have. That has to be taken into consideration because, again, OBBBA lowered or kept the same income tax rates for some areas, but not for others. And then I also talked about some of the ceilings where if you're $1,000 over, it can go way down. The number crunching CPAs could do a better job of answering those technical questions. But I will tell you, it is nowhere near simple, and it is much worse now than it was before. Why don't I take one more and then I'm going to move on.
Great. And I actually just wanted to shout out, Jim mentioned the number crunching CPAs being good at answering some of the more technical questions, although I think they'll also reserve the right to maybe generalize them a little bit more for our audience so that we're not just giving individualized, very specific tax planning advice without having all the information. That's something that we don't do, but we do give a lot of great advice in our even just our initial consultations. I know Jim mentioned it before and Justin put a link in the chat. I will tell you that we have our capacity is Jim mentioned. I'm not sure that he like defined the difference, but we offer assets under management services where we actually construct your master plan for you. But we also have a fee for service master plan available. That's what Jim mentioned and said we don't have capacity to take on any new ones of those or even to do the consultations for those until the last quarter of this year. We do have a wait list. You can get on the wait list, but if you're interested in assets under management, I really encourage you just to go ahead and click that link and complete the form this morning now because it is first come, first serve. So we are going to take people in the order that they come in today. So yes, the number crunching CPAs are going to be on the second session today. So you'll get a little taste of the kind of feedback that you'll get from Jim and from them in a consultation on our second webinar. And I think they may even join us for some of the question and answer portion as well as what they're contributing to the presentation. So I would definitely register for that as well if you haven't already. And I know I'm doing a bunch of stuff here, Jim, but the next question about Roth IRA conversions and tax brackets comes from Anne. And she
Just the
says,
last one, by the way. And by the
sorry.
way, before you go on, I hate to correct you, but I have to be fair. If we don't think you're a good candidate, I don't care how early you sign up, we're not going to accept you
Well,
because,
that's true too, Jim. Yes.
well,
Do you
well,
want to
that,
tell a little bit about the process of
well,
evaluating a master plan?
it,
Sorry, a financial summary.
no, see, here's the thing. If you're talking about, what might end up being 70 or 80 basis points, if we can't save you a lot of money in taxes, then we probably don't consider you a good candidate.
And
To
how
me,
do we figure that out, Jim? Like, do they have to come to the meeting beforehand, or how do we determine that?
well, one of the ways is we ask for a list of assets, we ask for your wills, we ask for some of your goals and things like that. And at this stage, I'm still doing all that myself. I am looking and saying, okay, is this a good candidate for people that we can save money for? So I am not in the business of getting business and then not helping people. It's A, it's not doing a great service. B, it's nowhere near as much fun. Um, and I can tell, so for example, um, and sometimes people write comments that I can tell, okay, they're going to be a good candidate. Like, oh, I am open-minded, or if somebody says the only thing I'm interested in is Roth IRA conversion and IRMA. I can't provide enough value for somebody like that. And that's not a good candidate. If somebody says, hey, I want the most from myself and my family, and I'd rather have people that really know what they're doing rather than people that don't, then they are a better candidate. So why don't I take one more and then I'm going to move on?
Great. And you're also looking at all of that in conjunction with the financial summary questionnaire that they've completed, their latest tax return, and all these other items just to see, yes,
And,
can we get them a lot of value for the money that they'll be paying us,
And
right?
guess what? Even though I sold my law firm, I'm still an estate attorney. I've been doing wills for 40 years. I look at wills and beneficiary designations of retirement plans, and a lot of times I see stuff there that just correcting those is worth many times the cost of an engagement. But anyway, why don't we take one more question, then move on?
Yes, this next question again, it's about Roth conversions and factors to consider with tax brackets. Anne asks, wouldn't you also advise to be in a lower tax bracket, not just assess how much money you have, so as to plan conversions? That's not just a math problem, it's a reality issue, right? So I guess she's asking how you look at tax brackets related to Roth conversions.
Well, that Well, again, I don't know how to answer better than it's a math issue. At first, I thought it was what are some of the things that you can do to lower your tax bracket, um, so that a Roth conversion might be more favorable. So sometimes, whether it is the structure of your investments, sometimes we do a whole bunch of, again, all our CPAs, by the way, interestingly enough, all our CPAs still do tax returns. So you would think that these fancy CPAs who are out saving people hundreds of thousands of dollars, would say, oh, okay, well, I don't have time for tax returns anymore. Tax returns are grunt work. I want to just do the high level planning work. And the CPAs said no. In order for them to retain, the sharpness that they need to do the sophisticated planning, they need to actually do the tax returns. That's something that I don't do anymore, and that's why these guys and one woman can do a much better job than I could because they are in the weeds. I remember an old law school professor used to say, if you don't know where it is on the 1040, you don't really understand it. And I think he was right. So that's what I thought the question was, and that is part of the example. So I'll just give you one idea that we might incorporate. Well, let's say that you're somewhat charitable, and let's just say, for discussion's sake, that your normal charitable gift is, say, $10,000 a year. Well, we might suggest that one year you do a $30,000 gift, and the other 2 years you do nothing. And then the year that you do the $30,000 gift, you also combine that with a Roth IRA conversion because the gift lowers your tax rates. So there's a lot of strategy that does go in to lowering your income taxes while we do that. And by the way, we don't have to do your tax return. in order to make those recommendations. Okay, unfortunately, I need to move on. Um, but I mentioned earlier that the classic time to convert is it when your taxes are at an all-time low in terms of tax bracket. So typically you're working, your tax bracket is high, then you retire, and let's say you don't have any other income other than say, let's say dividend income and interest, maybe a pension. So your income goes way back down, then number of years pass, and then let's say Social Security and your minimum required distribution kicks in, and your income goes back up. In fact, a lot of times we have finding for a lot of our IRA heavy clients, which is quite a few, if not the majority, that their income is higher when they are retired than when they were working, because your minimum required distribution is sometimes so high. Um, so that is, let's say, the general classic time to convert. Again, before Social Security and required minimum distributions. Then what else do we take into consideration? Well, what's your current tax rate? What do we think is the future tax rate? But again, the future tax rate is frankly an unknown, and it's not the only factor. One of the things that people overlook is that right now, if you are married, you're using married filing joint rates, which are much lower than single rates. So we have seen strategies proposed by insurance guys who say get a first to die policy that is, let's say, an income tax policy for the person with the higher IRA, typically the husband, at least for a lot of people. And then you get that big chunk of life insurance, and then you use that to pay the income tax on a Roth conversion after the husband dies. Well, the problem with that is, unless you do it literally the year the husband dies, which is the last year you can file a joint return, the tax rates are going to go up because the survivor will have to typically file as single. So, that is a factor. Another factor is, so basically the rule of thumb is do the conversions while you're both kicking. Although um, we've actually done deathbed Roth conversions, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm talking about going into the hospital with somebody that had literally days of life expectancy and having them sign some papers for Roth conversions. What state do you live in? So for Pennsylvania, where we have become national. We used to be a much more local practice, and then since I wrote these books and I had a radio show, I had a national following. But in the old days before the pandemic, people preferred seeing their advisor in person. Then after the pandemic, that changed. By the way, that was the best years ever for us because we went to this webinar setting, and it was kind of like every day was like today. You can't go outside and play golf or have fun or do something, so you might as well sit around and watch the webinar. But anyway, it used to be that most of our clients, and still most are, because we've been doing this for, again, 40 years, most of our clients are still Pennsylvania residents, and Pennsylvania doesn't tax IRA distributions, and it doesn't tax when you do a Roth conversion. So if we have somebody from Pennsylvania and they're moving, and the most miserable thing you can do from a tax standpoint is go from, say, Pennsylvania to, say, New York or California, we like to do the Roth conversion before they move. And by the way, they don't move because they want to save taxes. Typically, they're moving to be where their kids are. And some states tax Roth conversions, some don't. So that is certainly a factor. So again, if you're like in a state like Pennsylvania and you're moving to a state that is going to tax the Roth conversions, do the conversion before you move. Or if you're alternately, if you're, say, in California and you're moving to, say, a state like Pennsylvania, well, then wait until you do the move and then do the conversion, everything else being equal after you move to Pennsylvania. Future tax rates of your beneficiaries is very important. If your kids are in a high bracket, that will maybe make it a even more attractive to make a series of Roth conversions because you'll not only save yourself money, but you'll be saving your kids money in a very high tax bracket. They're in a low tax bracket, maybe being more conservative. What state does your kid live in? Are they paying income tax on inherited IRAs? And then we'll talk more about this in the estate planning section in the third session. But who gets what is very, very cool. So typically there, you're leaving traditional IRAs to the kid in the low tax bracket and Roth IRAs and after tax dollars to the kid in the high tax bracket. And what you end up with is think of it like a pie where, let's say you have kid number one in a high tax bracket, kid number two in a low tax bracket, and the IRS. What you're doing is you're taking a big slice of that pie that used to go to the IRS and you're dividing it between the kid in the high bracket and the kid in the low bracket so that both kids end up with a lot more purchasing power. So there's a lot that goes into this. And to me, it's one of the joys. And that, by the way, to me is one of my favorite things, which is cutting out or cutting down the slice of the pie that the IRS is going to get from your family and giving more of it for you and your family members. And sometimes the way to do that, oftentimes, is with a Roth conversion, where you're giving the IRS a little slice now, but then all the growth is income tax free. All right, I'm going to skip the part on Medicare, mainly because I kind of covered it. So I hate to go through this, but I don't want to cover it more than once, and that will allow more time for questions. In fact, by the way, I think right now why don't we take a few more questions? So Erica, I know you have more in the queue. So why don't you tell me, and by the way, Erica sometimes she could answer a bunch of these questions herself by now, but she will sometimes use her judgment and maybe combine a few questions. So sometimes if you ask a question, there might be elements of that question, but not word for word the exact question that you ask. So Erica, using your judgment that you have already done, how about if you give us what you think is going to be a question that will be of benefit to a lot of our audience?
Yes. So there are actually a few people who've asked. This is another tax bracket type question about Roth conversions, but Alberto asked this question, and then I can grab the other one. But basically, Alberto's question says, "What happens if you're in a low tax bracket and probably will be in the same in the future? Uh, doing a conversion now will put you in a higher bracket." I guess he's asking like, when does it like for if you're in a low bracket now and you'll probably be in that bracket later, should you do the conversion now or should you wait? What? And then someone else asked, uh, I'm paraphrasing now. I apologize if they ask it in the webinar chat, but something about like they're in the 35% bracket now while they're working, and they'll likely be in the 24% when they retire. Should they hold off on doing Roth conversions?
Well, let's do the easy one first. If you're in 35 now and you're going to be in 24 later, that's an easy call. Don't do the conversion now, do it later. Now, if you're going to retire in 20 years, that's a different story. But let's take the easy example. You're 65, you're at the top of your earning power, you're in the 35% bracket. And then after you retire, and I'm going to assume you might even be below 24% the year after you retire, but let's assume that to answer the question, you'll be in 24%. Yeah, that's an easy call if you're going to retire in just say a couple years. Wait. On the other hand, if you're going to there's going to be a number of years where you're going to keep working. Where a lot of people go wrong is they assume that they're going to be in a lower tax bracket and they end up not being in a lower tax bracket. And often the reason is because their minimum required distribution is so high. Or what happens is as you age, your minimum required distribution, particularly over the last 10 years, where we've had really a pretty strong market, where the market has sometimes grown much faster than your minimum required distribution. So your minimum required distributions are getting higher and higher because the base on which your minimum required distribution is getting higher and higher. All right, now let's take the tougher question. You're in a low bracket, and if you make a conversion now, you'll go into a higher bracket. And the answer there is probably, and again, it's case by case, but one of the games that Steve and I used to do is we used to kind of guess, what just based on our experience, not that we would ever recommend that to a client, but it's kind of fun. And by the way, I gave a fact pattern that I'm going to talk about later. I just kind of threw it out to people. And Steve Coleman guessed $1 million, and this is over like a 50-year period. And he nailed it within $100,000. And if you change the assumptions even just a little bit, he nailed it to the dollar. But this is what would say. Maybe that person might be a good candidate to have a 1-year conversion. So we don't do a series of conversions. Maybe we just do 1-year conversion for somebody in a lower bracket. By the way, I'll tell you the other thing that we've done for people in a lower bracket, which is we have made Roth IRA conversions for the person's parent. So let's just say for discussion's sake that you're in your 60s and your 70s and you have an elderly parent maybe in their 80s and 90s. We have sometimes, I love doing multi-generation work because a lot of times the parents just are stubborn, they won't do anything. But we've done some very valuable conversions for the parent. And frankly, a lot of times it didn't make any difference for the parent's lifestyle, but we've saved tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for the next 2 generations by doing Roth conversions. And then if you have a child with a disability, then we're sometimes saving millions. And we'll do one example for that. Okay, one more, and then we will move on.
So this next one is from James, and he asks, are there ways to offset the immediate tax in the first and second year when converting to a Roth, funds to a Roth?
Well, off the top of my head, that might be the year that you make a big charitable contribution, or you do other tax, tax related moves. You sell your losses. You do, although that doesn't necessarily work dollar for dollar. Or if you're self-employed, you kind of have maybe more control of your income. I remember once I was trying to get a bank loan. It was government sponsored. And if you were below a certain level, you didn't qualify. If you were above a certain level of income, you did qualify. And the banker said, you know, what is your income? My answer is, well, what do you need my income to be to qualify for the loan? So if you're self-employed, maybe you have some more control of timing and holding off on expenses or accelerating income, which is frankly a game that is easier to play if you have a business. Frankly, most of our clients are not business owners. A lot of people kind of specialize, and if you look at the marketing, like how to attract business owners, we typically, most of our clients are not business owners. They are people who, it's hard, of course, everybody has their own story, but we have a lot of people who they did not grow up, with a silver spoon, and, they got jobs, they went to school, they got 4-year degrees or even advanced degrees, and they went to work relatively early in life. They didn't make a ton of money, and they sometimes, um, they had maybe kids and they were paying for the mortgage and paying for the braces and paying for the car payments and just all the everyday expenses, even on a two-income family. And it was pretty hard to save money, but they were smart and they were fiscally conservative and they put money into their retirement plan. And typically, the employer put money into their retirement plan. So a lot of our, long-time clients came from Westinghouse, where people got jobs as engineers and worked for many, many years. And they and Westinghouse put money in. We at one point we had 650 college professors. If you were at the University of Pittsburgh, you put in 8%, they put in 12%. So over time, those IRAs and retirement plans, grow to be much higher than what I would call their after-tax dollars. So the planning on that is very important, and we do everything that we can. At this stage, we're tending to pick up more people who are either very close to or already retired. So we sometimes don't get the benefit of helping people during their retirement years. All right. Let's see how why don't we take one more and then we'll move on.
Okay, and I wanted to get to this, and I'll just say up front, we may want to, there are a lot of details in this. It's a pre-submitted question. Thank you, Paul, for pre-submitting it, and I did have it in my queue. I was thinking of holding it until session two because there are so many like current specifics. I thought maybe some of our number crunchers might be better placed to answer it, but he submitted it again here, and I don't know if he's going to be in a second session, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it, Jim. He said, uh, considering ERISA protections for Roth IRAs in Pennsylvania for Pennsylvania residents, if you had the opportunity to execute Roth conversions within your former company's 401k plan, in parentheses, he says pre-tax 401k to Roth 401k, or converting pre-tax 401k monies into a Roth 401k account at Vanguard, what would you do? Assume that you have had Roth 401k balances already for more than 5 years, both within your former company's 401k and Roth IRA balances within the Vanguard Roth IRA account. And I apologize, that's probably hard to keep straight.
That's okay. Let me get to the essence of that issue, and let me tell people what I think that he is talking about. What he is talking about is asset protection. So we all know that O.J. Simpson had a big judgment against him by the Goldmans, but he's living, uh, well, is he in jail now? But
Deceased.
anyway, he's fine financially, even though he has big judgment against him. Why is that? Because he had a lot of money and the question was specific, in an ERISA account. All right. ERISA accounts, like a 401k or a 403b, have the best asset protection, even better than IRAs. So what the question is would you do a an ERISA Roth conversion versus would you do it outside of the asset protection? First of all, IRAs still have creditor protection. It's not as strong as ERISA IRA protection. I would say that creditor protection is relative to maybe what your situation is. If you're a brain surgeon, or you design playgrounds, or you do something that you are very likely to get sued and you might get a judgment against you, I'm going to say that that is a stronger consideration than if you are just, somebody that has a job and don't have anything in particular that you would get sued. Very frankly, I sometimes like having control of the IRA and the Roth IRA that sometimes you lose if it is inside an employer's plan. On the other hand, one of the advanced techniques that we're going to talk about is actually the advantage of keeping some money in a 401k or a 403b, which is the opposite of what most people imagine. So creditor protection for some people is important. It's for other people, it's not as important. For whatever it's worth, for me, if I'm worried about creditor protection, I would rather you just get a good insurance policy. You can get, certainly at least a couple $1 million of protection for pretty cheap. And to me, that would be a cheaper and better way of handling creditor protection for most people. Okay, so I'm going to go on now to some of the advanced techniques. By the way, one of them is a lot of you have what I would call after-tax dollars inside your IRA or your retirement plan. And one of the things that you can do that's very simple, and we now have the support of a letter ruling that you can do this, is at retirement, you can direct the after-tax dollars to go straight to a Roth, and the pre-tax dollars to go straight to a traditional IRA if you choose to roll the money into an IRA. And a lot of people don't know about that, but and then there's an even more sophisticated method if you have a significant chunk of after-tax dollars in your IRA or your 401k, which we're not going to have time to get to. But let me tell you one of the simpler ones. Well, it's actually not so simple, but it is actually an advantage sometimes of keeping money in a 401k, which is if your plan allows it, which it often doesn't. A lot of people don't know that they can convert their inherited 401k to a Roth after you die. So let's say you're in a high bracket and your kid's in a low bracket. And you're thinking, gee, if I converted a high bracket and then I die and my kid's at a low bracket, we might be worse off. And maybe you will. But for some people, you can, let's say, wait until you die, then have your kid make a Roth conversion at their rate after you die. A lot of people don't even know about that. And we have used that. It is very cool. Well, it's not so cool for you because you're dead, but it's a very cool technique that a lot of people don't even know about. In fact, a lot of the 401k providers they've never even heard of it. And by the way, you can't do this with a traditional IRA. It has to be a 401k or a 403b. So a lot of times people think that IRAs and 401ks or 403bs are interchangeable, when in fact they're really not. They have a lot in common. Hardly anybody knows this technique. We've saved people a lot of money, well, not the IRA owner, but the kid, a lot of money with this technique. And in simple terms, the advantage is it ends up being taxed at your kid's bracket, not your bracket. And the other thing is, even though the IRS allows it, you have to make sure that it is allowed in your 401k or 403b. If you ask them, they probably have never even heard of it. So to me, anytime I'm dealing with a 401k or 403b, I'm not interested in even the head of HR. I don't care. I actually want to see the document itself because, well, you wouldn't think it's in English. It's really legalese, but it is English. And if you know how to read that kind of legalese, it'll tell you whether you can or whether you can't. And a lot of times you can't, in which case sometimes we set up people's own 401k or 403b. There's a lot of issues in that, and it doesn't work for more people than it does. But if it works for you, boy, it's great to save tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars on something that most people have never heard of. All right. Now, here's another advanced technique. I said before, the old rule was pay taxes later. Then Roths came around and it was, well, pay taxes later except for the Roth. And now I'm going to add an exception to the exception, which is sometimes it makes sense to pay taxes now and not do a Roth. So let's say, for example, you have a big IRA and you're paying a lot of taxes and you're interested in benefiting the next generation. Sometimes, and it's often a question of math, it makes sense to cash in some of your IRA. By the way, this might work for that person who's in the low tax bracket. You cash in some of your IRA, you pay taxes on the IRA withdrawal, you're left with after tax dollars. Then you take the after tax dollars and you gift that to your kids, who then invest that money in something that grows income tax free. So what would be an example? You take IRA money, you cash it in, you pay the tax, you have after tax dollars, you gift it to your kids, or one form of a gift is a 529 plan, which is typically used to educate grandchildren or children if you have very old children. I'm sorry, very young children relative to your age. Life insurance grows income tax free. So, by the way, that's not a new strategy. That's a very old strategy. It was called pension rescue. Um, and what some of the life insurance guys used to say is cash in some IRA, pay the tax on it, have after tax dollars, use that money to buy life insurance that grows income tax free. And I'm pretty leery about what somebody whose primary motivation is to sell life insurance. But frankly, sometimes those strategies do work. And sometimes getting money out of the estate has a real value, particularly if you're in a state like California, no, not California, like New York, that has an inheritance tax. California does not have an inheritance tax. High income, but not a bad place to die. But anyway, the other possibility is the kids use the money for their own Roth IRA, Roth 401k, Roth 403b, or for them to do their own Roth conversion, which makes sense. The other thing is, I love health savings accounts. Take some money, pay some IRA money, convert it. I'm sorry, don't convert it. Pay the tax, have some after-tax dollars, give the money to your kid and say, hey, start a health savings account. Health savings account, they're even better than Roth, by the way. You get a tax deduction, and assuming that you eventually withdraw that money and use it for some type of health care that's liberally construed, it comes out tax-free. With a Roth, you're starting with after-tax dollars. You don't get a tax deduction when you make a Roth contribution. With an HSA, you do. So between a Roth and an HSA, I'd rather you see you do the HSA. Perfect example where I'm not trying to sell the Roth. I'm trying to sell the best solution. The HSA is better than a Roth. I'm the first guy to admit it. So these strategies are kind of like a Roth IRA, but they grow outside the estate. And sometimes there's a lot of good reasons why this does make sense to do these, let's say, this non-Roth conversion technique that is similar to a Roth, where you pay the taxes on the IRA and then you gift some money to your kids. The other possibility is you gift the money to your kids and your kids don't invest it, they actually use it. We're going to talk more about gifting, and we're going to talk more about how much money you can afford at the second session. But a lot of times, just having your kids have money earlier in their lifetime makes a huge difference for them and maybe not any difference for you. And we will talk about that. Um, but again, the gift and the tax-free growth on the gift does fall outside of your IRA. So let's do a case study. Um, and I'm just going to do the assumptions real quickly. I had one earlier, but I'll just show you I, the earlier one was Roth versus no Roth. This one is optimal planning versus reasonable planning. Okay. So we're not taking, okay, this guy's a moron, this guy's a genius. Let's compare the different strategies. We're saying this guy's pretty good, and this guy, maybe with our help, is optimal. So I'm going to skip all the assumptions. You can read them if you're quick, or you take a picture, which I can't stop you anyway. We have a lot of people doing that during the workshops. But those are the assumptions. And I don't know if this one's in the book or not. I can't remember. But let's say reasonable assumptions. Both spouses take Social Security at 67. They max out their traditional IRAs. But after 67, they quit doing conversions. Then, as a result of our master plan or the work that we do, we say, hey, we want the higher earning spouse to wait till 70. We want to make Roth IRA contributions of 30,000 each. We want to do backdoor Roth conversions, which is something that we're not going to cover. Then we optimize Roth for 7 years. Some years 50,000, some years 100,000, some years $200,000 conversion. And then look at the difference over time for your kids. So we're starting when you're 65. We're assuming you're dying around 90. And then we measure it until your kids in today's dollars, and it's a $3.7 million difference. This is very, very significant. Um, and far exceeds what you would be paying in fees by a factor of many, that a lot of people just don't really understand how valuable the long-term growth of the Roth, getting the Social Security right. And by the way, we're not changing the investments at all. And if you do that and you get into asset location, boy, that really makes a huge difference. We'll talk about asset location, even though I don't talk about investment much, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I'll tell you another one that we did, and this is a true story and relatively recent. So my father-in-law, Walter Weinstein, by the way, if you've been following us for a while, Walter's pretty famous among our clients. Walter was the guy who sponsored family vacations for over 25 years. So for over 25 years, the, the kids, the spouses, the grandkids, and later the great grandkids, we all gathered. It used to be for a cruise. In more recent years, it was in the Poconos for about 5 days. He paid for everything except for booze. He paid for travel, he paid the lodging expense, and the whole family would get together and just have a wonderful experience. And this family is tight. This is my wife's family. And our daughter, who does have a disability, she is very close with her cousins. And what a difference between seeing the cousins every year for about 5 days, hanging out during the day, playing games at night, having your meals together. What a legacy he has left. So that's a little aside. But anyway, and he survived till 101. So boy, was he smart about money. And I'm going to oversimplify the facts, which aren't really accurate, but close enough for our purposes. And by the way, this was actually in the Wall Street Journal, and we're going to have a much longer description that will be in Forbes.com this month, actually. Oh, wait, no, it's the end of January, maybe the early part of February. But anyway, I'll oversimplify the facts. He had $1 million in his IRA, and that's not easy. That's not easy when you're 101. But he invested wisely. By the way, not brilliantly, just wisely, mainly in the market. Um, and he has two surviving children, and let's just say, for discussion's sake, that he leaves his money 50-50 to each kid. And that was the plan all along. So my wife would have come into roughly $500,000 of an inherited IRA. But our daughter has a disability, and technically she qualifies as an eligible designated beneficiary, which is a designation given by Social Security and also by the IRS that allows her to stretch the inherited IRA over her lifetime. That's kind of like the old pre-Secure Act rules. And what I asked Walter to do is I said, Walter, I know you want to make your daughter the primary beneficiary of her share, but could you give her the option to disclaim, and we'll talk more about that in the estate planning session, to the special needs trust for our daughter, that is your granddaughter. And he did that. So there's going to be two huge benefits to that. Number one, she'll always be in a lower tax bracket than us. And number two, she'll be able to stretch that inherited IRA over her lifetime. So the difference on that just $500,000 over her lifetime, measured in inflation dollars, is over $1 million. All right. So now, and by the way, even if your grandchild doesn't have a disability, there's a very good chance that your grandchild will be in a lower tax bracket than your child. So using this disclaimer strategy can save a lot of grandparents a lot of money. We actually have a special grandparent edition coming up in our newsletter. And again, this was covered in the Wall Street Journal with attribution to me, and it's coming out in Forbes.com. So anyway, there's lots of cool strategies that you can do. I'll just do the assumptions quickly. We're talking about a $500,000 IRA with a 10-year stretch for my wife versus a 60-year stretch for my daughter. 6% rate of return, 3% inflation, or a net rate of 3%. So that's kind of conservative, we think. We're assuming that the parents had $150,000 of income versus, let's say, a much lower income for the grandchild, and that the income by the parents is spent. And that's actually a good assumption, my wife would say, especially for us. But anyway, it worked out really well. Well, not for Walter, although actually, I think that he loved to save money, and he was much more about his family than himself. I mean, these vacations were very expensive, and I think he got great joy out of seeing pleasure for his family in the form of these vacations that he sponsored. I actually just got a note from one of my clients, and a lot of my clients, by the way, have moved to doing more family vacations. And the note said that, and he sponsored some of his nieces and nephews, not just his kids, but his nieces and nephews, to come to a birthday party of his dad. And he said it was the best money he ever spent, and he never had so much pleasure spending money as doing something for his family, which, you get notes like that, it makes everything worthwhile. And I'm not saying that I don't care about money, because that's not true. But particularly the older I get, the greater joy I get out of genuinely helping people and creating an impact. So the next question is, okay, Jim, you've given us a whole bunch of information. Um, what now? What should we do now? And by the way, for a lot of do-it-yourselfers, I genuinely hope this information is helpful. We have a bunch of bonuses that Erica will tell you coming up just for attending. Um, and that's fine for you do-it-yourselfers. We have people that would rather have a root canal than pay an advisor a nickel. But if you are interested, I will tell you about what I think is the best asset under management arrangement that I know of. And I've been around a long time and I know about a lot of arrangements and I know how good the people on our team are. And you can get this team, by the way, the same team that wrote that, well, I was the primary author, but they did all the number crunching for both of these best-selling books, one for disability. It's this one, it says for professors. The truth is it was really for everybody with an IRA or retirement plan. But if we can help, if you put together, if you ask for a consultation and we ask for information and you provide that, and we think that you are a good candidate to benefit from our strategies and services, and you'll have a retire secure consultation with either me or Jen, and or Dom. Those are our kind of, well, Steve is the senior guy, but he's up to he's not taking new clients now. But he's the one who trained Dom and Jen for years, by the way, not just a couple months, and they went through advanced training. But our CPAs, you start with maybe 7 years of tax experience, and then you go through additional years of training. We have one of the CPAs, Mike, who is well along on that path, but he's still not at this stage the primary number cruncher. He will be. He is assisting, but he's in that years long process. He's a veteran CPA himself. But anyway, you likely get me, either Dom and Jen, and then Mike as part of the training, if you will, kind of like the intern. And asking for that consultation is the first step towards putting me and our team to work for your family. I ask a lot of questions during that meeting. And by the way, I really do spend a lot of time. For each one, I'm the one who decides who gets consultations and who doesn't. If you send them to me, I actually look at your wills and your beneficiary designations, and wills and tax returns just speak to me. And I love to find people that have great opportunities. That's much more fun than somebody who's doing most everything right, although not very many. Most estate attorneys botch the wills. That's just, maybe botch isn't right. I'll just say don't optimize estate planning opportunities. And even though we don't draft anymore, we can still direct and get the estate plan just the way we want it, which actually is more aggravation for us, but it's the right thing to do because sometimes we can save more money by getting the estate attorney on board with our strategies than we can, say, with a Roth conversion. And then, of course, both is best. But if it does make sense during our meeting for us to work together, I actually dictate a long memo that clients find extraordinarily helpful. We've experimented with AI for these. They have these, Zoom and other places will summarize. Well, they don't. AI doesn't think. It's a database. It's not a brainchild. And I will not just summarize the meeting, but I'll summarize what I think were the most important things for you to know and to consider. And I put that into a memo that is then transcribed. And believe it or not, I use AI every day and I love it. But some things we actually still actually have a person transcribe it because we want it to be accurate. Um, and we provide that to you, which by itself is really valuable. Um, and it can be used for your estate attorney. It could be used for our number crunching CPA, even though they were on the call with us, and of course for you. The dictation alone can be transformative. It really is. Uh, excuse me, and I don't hold back. I'm pretty forthcoming in what I think can be done. Dom and Jen, they prepare for the meeting too. They usually have some excellent suggestions. And by the way, this session is about Roth. That's just one thing that we're looking at in reality. Roth is just one of the game-changing things, so we like to use that. The consultation, if you like us and we like you, it can lead to what we think is the best assets under management arrangement that I know in the industry. And I've been around a long time and I've, met a lot of advisors. I've trained a lot of advisors. In the old days, I used to get $10,000 a day to run around the country and train advisors. And guess what we talked about? We talked about Roth IRA conversions and we talked about the best estate plan for their clients. Guess what we're talking about today? Roth IRA conversions. And in the third session, we're going to be talking about the best estate plan for married couples. And guess what? It's the same plan that I was talking about in the 90s that has stood up to the test and survived the test of time. And we've saved people a ton of money. And it was so valuable for advisors. And back then, $10,000. And I had kind of a fledgling business. I was pretty young then, and I actually used it to meet payroll. But I've been talking about this stuff for a long time, and I've seen a lot of different arrangements, and I think ours is the best for the client, that is. Um, and if we want to make, if we both want to go forward, let me tell you how the arrangement works. So we do all this strategic planning, the Roth planning, the estate planning, the tax loss harvesting, um, gifting, insurance, charity, timing, all this stuff. That is well within our bailiwick, which I think Dom and Jen are just kind of like superheroes and add enormous value, even without the addition of the assets under management component. But we do all this strategy and we're data driven. I'm sorry. Yeah, of course we are. But the money managers we use, and we use a variety, they are data driven. They use the best academic information available. They do believe in math and science. They provide excellent service. Um, they're not only experts in asset allocation, but they're also experts in asset location. So, for example, if you were to look at my own portfolio, because I'm invested the same way I recommend for my clients, you would see a higher concentration of long-term investments in our Roth. And by the way, that $250,000 Roth conversion that we made in 1998, it's now a couple $1 million. Now, yes, we've added to it. Um, but boy, when you talk about the advantage of long-term growth, which is, that's how Warren Buffett got so rich. If he had started at 25 and retired at 65, he'd have, I think, a third as much money as he has. The reason he's done so well is he started when he was a young kid and he kept investing well until his 90s. Well, if you start doing a Roth conversion in 98 and it's 28 years later and you're measuring over a 30 years, which is how old our daughter is, that's how you get to millions and millions better off. But anyway, so the Roth would be invested much differently than the after-tax dollars that would be invested differently than the IRA dollars. And that's a very important aspect that a lot of advisors aren't taking into consideration, but they are. Um, and by the way, they're using low-cost index funds. They're using typically a firm called DFA, Dimensional Financial Advisors. Um, and that the closest thing to it is Vanguard. And by the way, they're huge. They are a $1 trillion company. So it's not like they're going to invest you in the Jim Lange fund. It's, very, very solid stuff. Um, but so you're invested in great investments, very, very low cost. Um, and after meeting our team, then you meet with their team, and then if you decide, and we like you and you like us, and we also work with an estate attorney, maybe somebody that we know, maybe depending on your state, somebody that we don't know. We're going to try to get the best estate plan for you. And I would say all this is transformative. I'm not looking to save you 500, $1,000, even 10,000 or even 100,000. I'm really looking to make a huge difference. Um, and that's what I think is so unique about our services is that you get a lot of wonderful upfront advice from our team where we're doing, in effect, this financial master plan up front. Again, we do have this financial master plan model. It has a long waiting list. The earliest we can even talk to you is October. Here I am looking for more business because that's the way I've run my life. And if you talk to our CPAs, Jen and Dawn told me yesterday they could work 18 hours a day between now and October, and they would not finish everything that they have. But um, but that's what happens when you do a good job and you keep people happy. And we have a very, very high retention rate. Um, but anyway, getting back to the assets under management, because that's actually, even though sometimes people have fee resistance, that's actually the best because um, we're not just doing the analysis up front, we are doing reviews every year. Now, we do have a $1.5 million minimum, a few exceptions, but we have so much time into it that it's even hard for us to make much money, even at 1.5 million, believe it or not, because we do put in so much time and very good people putting in very valuable time. This is not beginners spinning their wheels. And it includes this, let's call it financial master plan development. Um, Typically, the money managers do multiple reviews during the year, and we're doing one serious review. It's taking us 6 hours to do a review, usually 2 hours of prep, 2 hours of meeting, 2 hours of post review. And the value to you, assuming you are the good candidate, is I believe huge. And I'll look you straight in the digital eye and I'll say, boy, to have one of our money managers and Dom and Jen on your team, what often ends up being 70 or 80 basis points, your family can sometimes be way better off. And not just financially, also state of mind, because we haven't even talked about the financial worries that so many of us have. The strategic partners, they're the same people that my wife and I invest with. True fiduciary, best interest of our clients. They, like us, are true fiduciaries. And if you think you are a good candidate to work with us, click in the chat box and Justin will call. And assuming that I think that we can do a lot to help you, we will we will set up a call. So, Justin, if you can put in the link that people can follow um, to sign up for that consultation, I would appreciate it. And our office will find a mutually convenient time to meet. I will tell you, I have done thousands of consultations over the years. Of course, a lot of people didn't. Either we chose not to do work with them, probably because we didn't think that we could help them a lot, or because, I'll be honest with you, because we thought that'd be a pain in the you know what. And we're at the age and stage, we have so much business, we don't need pains in the you know what. If you're a pain in the you know what, and you've had 3 advisors in the last 4 years, and and four different CPA firms in the last 10 years, and you like to give people trouble, do us all a favor. We don't need that kind of business. And you think I'm really not kidding. And we do really good work. Our clients are very appreciative of us. They stick around for years and years. We want we want good clients. We want to do great work and service them for many years. So I've done a lot of these consultations. No one has ever said or even implied that it wasn't worth our time. And that includes the old days when people used to fly in to see us. They would drive in from all over the country. You'd be surprised. We used to have sometimes contests of who drove in from or flew in the furthest. We had people from California. We had people from literally all over the country come in, drive the night before, etc. And now most of the consultations these days are over Zoom. So it's a lot easier than it was in the old days. And I'm not allowed to guarantee results. Of course, that'd be a violation of every rule that I have to adhere to. But this is the guarantee that I can make, and I genuinely believe, is that the people that you will work with, they really care. They genuinely care. These are good people, and they get great satisfaction out of helping people a lot. The people they're not as happy with is they say, well, gee, how can I justify this fee if I can't really help that much, or if I'm just confirming what somebody already thinks is the best thing. They really care and they want you to get a lot of value. I think we have a great team. I really do. We will work hard. Jen and Dom, they're one of the reasons they're working so many hours is because they have a hard time, like cutting off the work and just saying, okay, I'm at a certain point you have to be done. They really they really work hard, and we always put your interests ahead of our own. Our advice, for example, doing Roth conversions, making big gifts to your kids, that if you think about in terms of fees, that goes against our self-interest. But those are our two very, very common recommendations. So we always put your interests ahead of our own.